Now, rounding is something that has been taught before, at least twice, so it is just a recap, but I will try to go through the main concepts again for you, so if you're a little bit stuck, you've got an idea of where to go. Okay, in Year 5 we do need to be able to round to the nearest 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 and 100,000 as well as the nearest tenth, but I'm just going to concentrate on 10, 100 and 1,000 because once you know those, the concept is exactly the same. So a couple of points first. Rounding to the nearest 100 means rounding to the nearest multiple of 100. That's what we mean. So any multiple of 100, as you could work out if you counted up in hundreds, is always going to have a 0 in the ones and the tens. 100, 200, 300, 400 and so on. It might have more than just those two zeros, but certainly has to have those twos at the end. Multiples of 10, of course, have all got 1 0 in the ones place. Now again, 300 for example is a multiple of 10 and a multiple of 100. Multiples of 1,000, I think this should be 1,000, will have 3 zeros. They will have a 0 in the ones place, the tens place and the hundreds place as well. Okay, rounding. Whenever I am doing rounding, I always would suggest you use a number line. A number line is easy. You can draw it anywhere. As long as you know how to mark it up, you're fine, and just thinking about where you start each time is quite important. So I'm going to go through one step by step. So first of all, our task is to round 3,247 to the nearest 10. So the first thing we do, we take our number. Here it is, 3,247. The tens digit is 4. That's what we're interested in because we're going to the nearest multiple of 10. So we could say that this number, 3,247, has 324 tens. That helps us get started because that's what's got to go at this end of the number line. Okay, so that's what we do. We find our number, we look at the digit we're interested in because we're talking about the nearest 10 is the tens digit, and then we think how many tens are there altogether in that number. 324 tens, which is 3,240. Okay, so that's one end of our number line. We now need to think about what's going to go this end. Now we're only thinking about multiples of 10, so it's going to always be 10 more here. Okay, so in this case, it's going to be 3,250. Okay, because that's the next multiple of 10. So we've got 3,240 and 3,250. Once you've managed to mark either end of your number line, you then need to label the midpoint, the point exactly in the middle. So here it is in orange. The midpoint, there's 10 altogether from one end to the next, so it's 5 to take us halfway, so the midpoint is 3,245. Then the last thing we do is label the number line with the original number. So we find the first number we had, which was 3,247. Where does that sit on the number line? Now, because it's here, it is definitely closest to this multiple of 10, so there's our answer. If it was exactly in the middle, you can't say it's closer to either. But what we do in maths is we round up if we're exactly halfway. Okay? So there you go. 3,247 rounds up to 3,250. I will put a still on the video now of all three of those sheets together to show you the step by step. Okay, another one for you just to show you a little example, and then we'll do a couple together. This time we're going to go with a slightly bigger number. So rounding the number 421,089 to the nearest 10, 100 or 1,000. Well, it doesn't really matter how big the number is, it's just the digits here that we're looking at. So, first of all, to the nearest 10. Well, if you take this number, the tens digit is 8. So you could say that this number has 42,108 tens, which would be here. Okay, so we've kept all of those numbers up to the 10 the same, and then we've just taken it down to a multiple of 10 for the last digit. Then we go 10 more. Then we find the midpoint. Then we label, and that tells us that to the nearest 10, 421,089 is rounded to 421,090. Second number line then, so now we're going to the nearest hundred. So our hundreds digit is a 0. So we could say that this number has 4,210 hundreds in it. Or we could cut it off at the hundreds digit and then just use zeros to fill in the other columns. It's another way of looking at it. So we've put that number this end of the number line. We're talking about the nearest hundred, so we add 100 on to get that number. We then find the midpoint. Then we label to find out which it's closest, and in this case it rounds up to 421,100. Lastly then, we're rounding to the nearest thousand. So again, we're looking at the thousands digit. In this case, the thousands digit is this 1. So we're going to have 421,000, and then these are all going to be zeros. We then go 1,000 more. This is the difficult bit because you've got to make sure you are going 1,000 more because we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. Then we find the midpoint, and then we label where our original number would be, about, and that tells us that this time it's going to round down to 421,000. I'm just going to do a couple on this piece of paper for you so I can talk you through it as I go. So this time, let's take a 6-digit number, and you can practice yourself. You can generate your own 6-digit number if you want to. So we'll do the number 327,107. Okay, so first of all, let's round this number to the nearest 10. So we start with our number line. Okay, and again, a number line, blank line, just a line. You can do it anywhere. Ideally, I'd like you to draw it with a ruler, but if you haven't got a ruler, you could do it freehand. Okay, so we're going to the nearest 10. Well, our tens digit is 0. So I'm going to think about it up to that point. I'm going to take this much of the number so far. That's how many tens are in my number. This number is going to become a 0 because we need to have a multiple of 10. So this end of my number line is going to be 327,100. Because we're doing to the nearest 10, we then need to go 10 more than this number. So it's the tens column that I'm changing to come up with 327,110. Then I'm going to label the midpoint. So that's going to be 327,105. Then I think, right, where would this number sit? Well, that's 107 at the end, and that's 105, so it's going to be about here, which means when we round it to the nearest 10, we're going to round up to 327,110. Okay, so with rounding, it's important to be able to round. Now, if you're finding that quite tricky, it might be worth you doing some practicing. Pick a 6-digit number, try rounding it to the nearest 10, 100 or 1,000, get someone to check it for you, and then keep practicing until you're really happy with it. Because the other thing we need to be able to do is solve some problems involving rounding. So I've got a couple to do with you, and then I'm going to give you your task for today. So a number, mystery number, is 3,900 when rounded to the nearest 100. What is the smallest number it could be? What is the largest number it could be? So this time you have been given the answer. You know what it is when it's rounded to the nearest 100. We know that it is 3,900. So this time I'm going to make a slightly longer number line, and I'm going to put the number that it rounds to in the middle, because some numbers will round up to it and some will round down to it, so we need to be aware of that. Okay, so when it's rounded to the nearest 100, it rounds to 3,900. We're talking hundreds, so I'm going to go back 100 here, 100 less, to 3,800, and then I'm going to go 100 more. 100 more than 3,900 is 4,000. Okay, I'm then going to mark on my midpoints for both of them. So we have 3,850 and 3,950. Okay, So we know that our number, when it's rounded to the nearest 100, rounds here. So at what point along this number line do we start rounding here? Well, if my number was here, I'm always going to go that way. And in actual fact, I'm always going to go down until I get to here. When I get to 3,850, I'm going to start rounding up to 3,900, and I'm going to keep rounding up until I get to the number itself. Then I'm going to keep going, but I'm then going to start rounding down to 3,900 until I get to here. When I get to 3,950, I'm going to round up. So that's going to be gone too far. So I'm going to say that if I got to 3,949, I would still round down. 3,950, I would round up. So there we have it. Those are all the numbers, in between those two numbers, are all the numbers that will round to this number when rounded to the nearest 100. So going back to the question, the smallest number it could be is 3,850, and the largest number it could be is 3,949. Okay, question number 2 then reads like this. A number becomes 317,000 when it's rounded to the nearest 1,000. The number is made from these digits. So you've got a selection of 6 digits there. Write 2 possible numbers that it could be. Well, there are lots of possible answers, but I'm just going to solve it with you so you can see my thinking process. So again, we know what it's rounded to. Now we know the number could be less than that. It could be more than that. So we're going to start with that number, 317,000 in the middle. Okay, and we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. So this end is going to be 1,000 more. Oops, squeeze in my 0 there. And this one is going to be 1,000 less. Okay, then I'm going to do my midpoints again. So this time it's 1,000, so halfway is going to be 500. There's my midpoints. Now I can do what I did up here. I can say, well, actually, anything from here to just before there is going to round to this number. So those, I've got my limits now. I need to have a number that's between 316,500 and 317,499. Okay, so that's part 1. I now need to think about how I can use those digits to make a number in between those 2 parameters. So if I start with well, it's got to start with 317 because we haven't got a 6 here. So we could go 317, and I'm going to cross these off as I go to make sure I've got them. And then I've got to get a number that's lower than 499. So I could have 480. Let's just check, where would that go on my number line? About here. So that works. And then another possibility then, so again, it has to start with 317 because there's no 6 in our selection. And I've got a 4, 8 and a 0. So it could be a 0 this time, and then 4 and 8. So those are 2 possibilities. Maybe you could pause the video and see if you could come up with all the possibilities to solve that problem. Okay, so to finish off then, I've got your task for today, which is here. So it's just some rounding problems, similar to the ones we've done. There is a little extension here, an enrich extension that you might like to have a go at. Oops, make sure that's in line for you. I will do a still of the sheet at the end if you need to have a closer up version. And I will be back tomorrow with the answers.